Hello, I'm Todd Phillips, the editor of Canadian Auto Dealer, and I'm here today with Kristy Atkinson from Georgian College, the director of the Georgian College Auto Show, and 5 of the student directors who organized this year's show. Now, the show didn't happen, but the student directors did a tremendous amount of work getting it organized, going through the paces, and getting it ready for public. And we thought we really would take a chance today to meet some of them and hear about what they were going to do differently at this year's show and learn a little bit about them. So, Kristy, first of all, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Todd. It's a pleasure to kind of get everybody together and talk a little bit about the Georgian College Auto Show.
Well, you've been working with the student directors over the past few years and sort of working with them, and they always sort of come together as sort of a unique group, and each group is somewhat different. Tell us about this year's group of student directors we're going to meet in a couple minutes.
Yeah, so we've got 5 student directors this year. They started in September to work on the show that was going to happen next month. These group of students are all in their latter part of the degree program, and they're honestly the perfect team. They've worked so well together, and their strengths really play off of each other. They're really into networking and connecting, and they're detail-oriented and analytical, and I think once you get to meet them, you'll have a really good understanding of how good of a team they really are.
Well, that's a perfect segue into our next segment. We want to meet some of the directors. So we're going to start with Christopher Jarrett, who is the Director of Student Experience. Now, Christopher, what would you have done differently this year in your role?
So my role is hugely based on making sure everybody is content and working together within their teams. That's really the biggest opportunity to change an experience for the students as they go through the program. And last year it was really emphasized on product knowledge and professionalism and things like that, which was done absolutely spectacularly. So really amplifying things like that with training done by a company that we bring in. And also just making sure everybody's staying professional in all the events that we're holding. But it's also a huge part because everybody in the program is going to be going into the workforce together. So making sure everybody's close and tight-knit within their groups is a really, really important part of my role. So building a more welcoming environment is really huge. So we were doing that, working hand in hand with Madison Marple through sponsorship, throwing bigger team building activities, and more of them was a big push this year. And also just making sure that everybody's happy in their own position is huge. So,
well, it's interesting. I've interviewed a lot of student directors over the year, and even people in industry who've gone through the program, and most of them really remember fondly. Some of their fondest memories are always the auto show experience, where they felt they were really doing something, real in the industry that the industry really needed. So kudos to you on that. Now, on a personal note, where do you think you're going to end up? I mean, you're at the tail end of your program now, so where do you think you're going to end up in the industry? Have you had some thoughts on that front?
For me, yeah, I've definitely thought through it quite a bit. And me personally, I find a lot of satisfaction in seeing a smiling face on the other side of work that I've done. I'm very energetic, so I like working with people quite a lot. So being part of a company that's really forward-thinking and innovative, is really important to me, because that's kind of where you see the biggest changes. And I mean, I'm a huge car enthusiast that's rooted from classic muscle cars, right? So I'm really enthusiastic about the way that the auto industry's come to this far. So seeing it come or go even further is really huge for me. So I would like to work in the head office aspect, like for a manufacturer. Which one, I'm very open still, but it really depends. For me, it's huge making sure that the company dynamic is really, really strong, right? So.
Well, that's great. Hopefully some of the OEMs out there will have seen this, and we'll take note of that. Thanks for that. I'm going to move on now to the next director, Taylor Walker, who is the Director of Marketing and Media Relations. Now, Taylor, I guess your role was really going to be to advertise and draw people out to the event, and even do interviews with people like myself. I know I've often interviewed some of the directors of marketing in the past. Tell us about what you had planned to do somewhat differently at this year's event.
All right. So this year I plan to implement like a heavy social media and radio strategy. Unfortunately, I had planned to do everything starting April, and it got cut short. Now with that, I was able to at least see what I did and how maybe I would be able to do that differently now going forward. because a lot of it is kind of, you set your marketing plan, but nothing is always fixed. So you kind of always need to be flexible in order to adapt to whatever challenges that may come up. And that was the one thing that I found that I was benefited the most from that. So, I mean, and then, yeah, you're just trying to bring everybody to the show, and I don't know.
Well, you become sort of the spokesperson for the show. I know local media come out, industry media come out and do interviews and line up interviews, even with other directors. So I guess you would have played that coordinator role, really being the ambassador, the public face, at least to the media and the public. So this is your chance now, I guess, to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, like, again, everything was set up for the next month. So it was, all my stuff was kind of all behind the scenes, and everything I'd set up was ready to go. But, I don't know. I'd take that as a challenge and an opportunity to deal with that going forward. And I don't know, you got to learn how to roll with the punches, kind of.
Well, that's a good segue to the next question. And where do you think you're going to be rolling with the punches in your career? Have you made a decision? Is it, there's the dealership, the aftermarket, the OEM community, even suppliers, banking, fintech. There's so many choices now in the automotive sector. So.
Yeah, right now my mind is very open, especially with this pandemic going on. I'd imagine there's going to be some great opportunity coming up. I still have my 3 co-ops of it left to do. So I don't know how that will change going forward with all the different, the new regulations being put into place and all that. I think right now I'm just keeping an open mind, and I want to see what opportunities become available throughout this new change in the industry.
Awesome. Well, great. Thanks for sharing that. And we're going to move on now to another student director, Caleb Jolkowski, who's the director of site management and logistics. So Caleb, you would have been responsible for coping with weather, tents, vehicles, moving them in and out, all that sort of stuff on site. Fairly crazy role, I guess, in the midst of all that. Now, you're not going to be able to experience that in person, but I'm sure all the planning went into that. Tell us what you were going to do somewhat differently in terms of the site management and logistics at this year's show.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of planning goes into it, and it's sort of the behind the scenes sort of setting up the real factors that make the show take place, all of the structures of the show. And it would have been exciting to see that all come to life. I had a lot of new ideas that we were trying to implement this year. The big thing was we were trying to, in years past, we've had sort of a luxury tent area at the show, and then a separate parking lot where the rest of the sort of mainstream manufacturers have been. And a big thing we were trying to do this year was to make it an easier flowing show for all of our show goers, all the visitors. So we were going to we had plans in place to put all of the manufacturers in one singular parking lot and kind of make different streets, I guess you could call it, of manufacturers, and make it sort of easier for customers to flow around and go from, say, a luxury manufacturer over to the big OEMs with the big tents set up like that. Another one of the big things, a challenge actually of the show that is kind of lost in the background, is the water distribution for our students. When you're working the auto show, it's 2 setup days and then 3 show days and then another teardown day. A lot of years, mostly in June, it's the hot blazing sun. A big challenge is keeping our students hydrated. So in years past, we've tried different systems with plastic water bottles. Last year, the directors from last year made the commitment to going more green with our water distribution, and they brought in buggies essentially with reusable water bottles for our students, which I think was a very important step in terms of the future of the show. And I really wanted to keep that sort of mentality going forward. The problem with that is the placement of such water canisters, because they have to be hooked up to a water system. So they're kind of out of the way from where the tents are. So I had been working closely with a company to bring them in, where they actually are able to set up chilled water stations that don't require electricity and don't require a water hookup. They just have reservoirs basically filled with ice. And we could set those right up beside the OEM tents to keep all of our students happy. They can just walk over 5 minutes to get a fill up on their water bottles, and really kind of elevate their enjoyment of the show. And another area we wanted to really elevate was sort of the dynamic of the show, was the amount of equipment that we had there. So I kind of made it a personal project to implement big rigs into the show. So we were in talks with Peterbilt Canada, who was very excited to take part, have a student-run team for the first time in quite a while, and bring a couple of big rig trucks to the show, which obviously is a big appeal to the community, and a few other manufacturers. So we had a lot of good things in the work, definitely.
Well, I've certainly attended a lot of auto shows, and these are all the things, the nitty gritty behind the scenes stuff you don't really see that makes a really big difference, yeah, a positive show experience and otherwise. So maybe you can take that experience into the real world if you want to head out that way. Now, speaking of that, where are you leaning towards in terms of industry? Have you given that some thought? Have you made a decision, or are you just still making your mind up?
Yeah, I've been lucky enough through my co-ops. I've been able to kind of diverse my experiences. So I've done the head office on 2 separate co-ops in marketing departments and digital marketing with a couple of OEMs. I've also worked at the dealership level, doing sort of an online sales/sales analysis type of position. And I've also worked part-time the last 3 years as a service advisor at an aftermarket shop. So I have a lot of different exposure to the industry. Definitely the way I was leaning is sort of becoming into a dealership sort of aspect. A lot of the parts I did was as a sort of sales analysis. So I think a lot of dealerships maybe order inventory, but they don't have exactly a great idea of what they really do want. Some do, but others are kind of lacking that area. So to work for, say, like even a small dealer group on the rise to kind of make sure they're ordering in the correct inventory and whatnot. The company that I previously did a co-op with, even through all of this madness, has extended an invitation for me. So I'll actually be starting with them fairly soon to sort of take on a role like that and try to basically get our numbers up going forward through all of this.
Well, that's great news, and certainly the industry could use a lift right now, and it needs a lot of talented young people. And I'm glad to hear you're joining the ranks of the dealership world, and best of luck to you for there. We're going to move on now. Thanks for that to Scott Van Dorp, who is the director of customer experience. So, Scott, this is a very important role. Obviously, the people coming to the show don't want to see the same old, same old. You want to change it up every year to offer them a few new bells and whistles. What did you have in mind for this year's show? What would the public in Barrie and surrounding counties and towns have experienced this year?
Yeah, well, for this year, we really wanted to get our customer flow kind of more spread out and take advantage of all the space that we had at the show. In previous years, we've had our fun field, which is a family area. So yeah, you came to look at cars, but we want to keep your entire family invested in having a good time there. So we were looking at putting a lot of interactive things into that area. Kristy and I were working on a car creation station, which would have been cool to see young kids running around in a vehicle costume that they'd made. We've been able to go to the whole show and kind of had some fun. It would have made for some really great pictures, I think. Stuff like that, little interactive things that keep the whole family enjoyed. On top of that, Kristy and I, again, she had a great idea to implement Instagram hotspots at our show. So we were hooking up with manufacturers and implementing a step and repeat at their booth with kind of a showcase car. So it would have made for a really great spot for everybody to go. It would have been on our map for you to go and take these pictures and post it up. And once you posted, it would be hooked to our HOTS or our hashtag printer. And you could go pick up this thing. It would be covered around with an auto show border. I think it would have been pretty cool. Would have been, yeah, there's stuff like that was going to be cool. Also working with Caleb a lot to make sure that flow was easy as far as sight lines. We moved a lot of stuff. Caleb moved a lot of stuff. And we wanted to make it equal advantage for everyone at the show. We wanted customers to be able to see where they were going, see where they came from, and see a next opportunity. Yeah, that was going to be a lot of fun, I think.
Have you given some thought in terms of where you want to end up in your career?
Yeah, I've done 2 co-ops with Subaru Canada in their training department, working to develop both online and in-person training for salespeople and technicians. I thought that was a lot of fun. Working with people around Canada and seeing the impact you could make was definitely cool. So training in particular really interests me, whether that's specifically for technicians, salespeople, or anybody in your company. I think that would be pretty interesting. The other thing that I've had a lot of work done with is just the service sector in general. I started in the industry pretty young, working for a dad's shop. So seeing what the future of the technical side and the service industry is going to be, being a part of changing it, because it will change. I think I'd like to be a part of that.
Well, it's great. Those are two areas that are very well needed. Certainly the training is going to be needed even more now than ever for people as they're responding to a whole new world. I can tell you, I talked to a lot of dealers across the country. Everything is changing in the dealership world. Like a lot of businesses, they're adapting on the fly, new processes, new systems, and there's going to have to be a whole training in there. So if you do go in that area, I'm sure there'll be lots of work ahead of you for years to come. So thanks for sharing that. So we're going to move on now to Madison Marple, the last student director who looked after sponsorship and performance. Obviously, it has probably some tough conversations have to have with sponsors who were eager to have the show and obviously not able to hold it. So really, Madison, what were some of the things that you were going to do with your sponsors this year to help make it kind of a different experience?
Yeah, well, first off, thank you, Todd, for having us today. This has been an awesome opportunity. The big thing with sponsorship this year, my measurable goal was obviously to break previous sponsorship records. And by doing that was kind of including new sponsorship packages. One of the new ones we had for this year was a street sponsor package. So that allowed certain walkways of the show to be named after the corresponding business. And then ultimately kind of keeping things open, keeping things ready for customization, I think was one of the most fun parts of this job, because I could have a business that wanted to be part of the show that maybe didn't fit into our pre-packaged sponsorship items. So I had, total control to create something that would fit for them, that would give them the involvement they're looking for, and kind of allow them to participate in the show in a new way that everybody can benefit from.
Well, it's interesting. I believe last year, the person who was in charge of sponsorship, and Kristy will correct me if I'm wrong, was AJ, and his goal was to beat the record of all previous sponsorship. It looks like you're going down. I love that. I love that competitiveness that's already there, because that's really what the industry is about, good, healthy competition and driving performance. That's a good sign. Have you thought after this where you want to end up in terms of the industry, like the aftermarket, OEM, supplier side of, where do you think?
Yeah, I mean, going into my final semester this summer, it's definitely always on my mind what I'm going to be doing after graduation. I think what this position really helped was open my eyes to how much I enjoy the networking aspect of this industry. I enjoy kind of representing a company publicly. So to find a position like that, whether it be corporate or dealership, any facet of this industry, I think as long as I'm doing something that I'm genuinely interested in and kind of getting to put all of this experience I've learned into, a different kind of position, that's ultimately what I'm looking for.
Well, that's great. I love the fact that you're open to the different industries and all the students, because one thing I've seen in the midst of this pandemic, obviously we're in the midst of recording this, the industry is pulled together like I've never seen. I mean, you've got the dealerships, they're working closely with the OEMs, they're working closely with the suppliers, everybody's sharing ideas, best practices, and I think the industry has really discovered, despite how everyone is in their silos at times, how interconnected the entire industry is, and how one side of the industry does, the other side is going to do well or not do well. And that includes a lot of suppliers, vendors, bankers, lenders. They all need good students. And I'm sure that you guys with this profile will be recruited, as many other students have been over the years. And I hope you find your place in the industry. One last thing, Kristy, any other final thoughts after hearing them all sort of recount their experiences?
You know what? It's such a shame that this event can't take place, and they really put a lot of thought and a lot of detail into these plans, and they lived it and breathed it. They were scheduled to be in the office about 12 hours a week, and anytime you went by, they were always in there working. Madison has such great connection skills. Like, he can bring two people together. He can start a conversation with really anybody. He loves to dive into the data and try to figure out what it all means. And Caleb's so detail oriented, and Chris is a people person. He'll do anything to give anybody a laugh and make people feel at ease. And Scott is always looking to try to make something better. What can we do? How can we innovate? And working honestly with these five guys has been a pleasure for me. And anybody in the industry would be remiss if they didn't give these guys a chance. And unfortunately, the auto show didn't happen, but there's going to be a lot of other things that they have ahead of them that they'll be able to work on and see through. And I'm excited to see where they're all going to land.
Awesome. Well said. That's a great recap. And guys, thanks for taking part in this. And hopefully you get to get a bit of exposure on our industry, and they get to see who you are. And I know the industry definitely is going to need a lot of skilled people from the Automotive Business School and otherwheres to help rebuild the industry and make it stronger than ever. And it's always great. I always love talking to the students. So thanks all of you today for joining me.